This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the next 60 minutes, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from Africa and beyond. But first, a run through the markets. Now, the all-share, the JSE, ended today's trading session about 0.2% lower. It's about 4% in the red on a year-to-date basis. The all-share shed about 1,000 points since the start of August. Naspers, and essentially one of its investments, is our focus, so it does own part of the tech, payment and gaming colossus Tencent, and it ended Friday's trading session about half a percentage point lower. Tencent itself was a focus of a probe by the US government, according to reporting by Bloomberg, which is looking into data sharing protocols that gaming companies like Epic Games have with that particular company. We'll of course be talking about the tech issues between the US and China a little later in the hour. Here's what's coming up tonight. The Libyan military strongman Khalifa Haftar agrees to lift an oil blockade after a revenue-sharing deal was arrived at with the authorities in Tripoli. Authorities in Zimbabwe are in talks with international lenders to back a new securities exchange. And a ban on the Chinese-owned apps TikTok and WeChat is to take effect from the 20th of September. But let's start the hour in Libya, where the commander of one of the key warring factions over there, Khalifa Haftar, says that his forces will let oil production resume after an 8-month blockade. A senior politician in Tripoli also says a committee will be formed to ensure fair distribution of revenue from oil sales. However, Libya's National Oil Corporation, which runs Libya's oil facilities, says it will not lift the force majeure notice on export until Haftar's forces have been withdrawn from oil facilities. The Tripoli-based Central Bank of Libya revealed that the blockade by Haftar's eastern forces has cost the North African state some $9 billion in lost revenue so far this year. The stoppage has become a huge obstacle to new efforts to seek a path forward in peace talks after Haftar's assault on Tripoli fell apart in June.
I announced the resumption of production and export of oil, with all requirements and necessary procedures to guarantee a fair distribution of oil revenues and to make sure they're not used to support terrorism or put at risk of theft. These are guarantees to resume production and exports. We're keen to do this with the aim of improving the living conditions of our citizens.
Into aviation, South African Airways business rescue practitioners have received a letter from the government indicating its commitment to fund the ailing state-owned airline. Now, that notification came ahead of a creditors' meeting called to review the SAA business rescue plan. This comes after the money needed to fund the plan was initially not secured on time. The letter, however, outlines the mechanisms and the timelines to raise the $10 billion, about $646 million, 10 billion rand rather, or $646 million, are yet to be finalized. The business rescue practitioners are keen to engage the government in detail and to get a much clearer understanding of the timelines and the flow of funds into the firm. These practitioners will communicate with all relevant parties next week after meeting the government to discuss the funding plans. The SAA Cabin Crew Association and the National Union of Metal Workers boycotted that creditors' meeting. They sent a letter to inform the government of their intention to legally challenge the liquidation of the carrier.
We are confident we're going to get what we want. We will not relent until we get what we want. I think the DPE has made us promises. They've made 3,000 people take packages. And the least they can do is give them what they promised and pay them their money. We'll march every week if we have to. We'll march the DPE. We'll march the ANC that has put together a government that has failed us as people of South Africa.
On to West Africa now. Inflation levels have risen to levels not seen in 29 months after a slowdown in economic activity due to the COVID-19 inspired lockdowns and disruptions in supply chains led to much higher food prices. A steep decline in oil prices and the subsequent plunge in foreign currency earnings has further complicated the government's efforts to revive that ailing economy. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam with this report from Abuja.
The latest Consumer Price Index report released by the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that Nigerians are writhing in hardship as inflation surges. Inflation rose to 13.22% from 12.82% recorded in July, the highest in over 2 years. Prices of food and other essential commodities are on a steady rise, leaving the majority of citizens in economic turmoil.
Even the way we feed, we have to be careful because the price of especially food commodities has gone up. Gari that we used to buy 200 naira is now 350 naira. If you take 10,000 naira to the market, you can't come back with anything meaningful. And for the fact that we are not getting anything commensurate to what is happening, commensurate to the fact that the price of things has gone up, like if you are being paid, if you are receiving salary, they have not increased your salary. So how, it's an irony. It's an irony.
Various government efforts to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on the economy is being threatened. This recent inflation was driven by increased passenger transport, medical services and pharmaceutical products. Among other unfavorable government policies, it's worsened by the recent hike in prices of essentials like fuel and electricity tariffs.
If you look at it, it's just the government's policy that is causing this thing. So it is man-made, basically. It is not a natural disaster. When this administration came into power, what did they do? They banned importation of raw without creating refineries existing or making existing refineries work. They came up with banning importation of food such as rice, tomatoes, tomato paste and the rest, when we don't even have the power to meet up to the local demands that we have.
The central bank in a recent report painted a gloomy picture that inflation could exceed 14% by December 2020. The report named budget deficit, rising unemployment, and the impact of COVID-19 lockdown as factors that might truncate government's intervention efforts. And economic watchers warn that Nigerians may need to brace up for tougher days ahead. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Airlines in Nigeria say they are still incurring losses 2 months after flight operations officially resumed. The operators do say the government may need to intensify efforts to ensure that local airlines remain viable enterprises, even as the country continues to struggle to mitigate the damage done by the COVID-19 pandemic. To date, Nigeria has recorded over 56,000 cases of infection. Over 1,000 people have died as a result of COVID-19. Here's CGTN's Phil Ihaza with the details from Abuja.
The president of the Airline Operators of Nigeria, Abdulmanaf Yunusa, says only about 25% of the total fleet of domestic airlines is in operation because of very low demand from air travelers. He says despite the fact that airfares have remained the same as before the pandemic, many people are not traveling for fears of contracting the coronavirus. And this has left many aircraft idle in hangars and accruing maintenance costs. Yunusa said the government's support is urgently needed to prevent most domestic airlines from collapsing as a result of poor profitability. The federal government in June pledged to bail out the local aviation sector with over $70 million in loans as part of measures to cushion the effect of the pandemic, but the airline operators say the funds have not been disbursed to them yet. The aviation minister says it's working towards making the funds available soon. The government has also maintained that it's doing its best to combat the outbreak and ensure economic activities get back to normal in order to boost passenger traffic via the country's airways. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
All right, and a little earlier we started, of course, with a story around the funding procedures and guidelines for South African Airways, the carrier that essentially is fully state-owned. It went into business rescue back in the middle of December last year. But since then, the South African government has been a bit slow in raising the 10 billion rand, or about $650 million that it needs to essentially revive the enterprise. What's going on? Let's find out. Angelo Coppola joins us now with more data on this from Johannesburg. Angelo, this has been a very long-running story. Barely a month ago, the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, he argued that the cash that the airline was asking for would not be used to implement the business rescue plan. Assuming that's still the case, what would this $646 million be used for then?
Well, look, that's the nature of politics, basically. Things change, things are very fluid. It's been in Mboweni's position from the start, at least 18 months ago, that he was very firm on and that he wasn't prepared to give any money there. But this is politics and it's fluid and it's negotiable. As to what the money is going to be used for, well, as you heard, staff at SAA who took those voluntary severance packages or retrenchment packages more than a month ago haven't received a cent of that money just yet. Many are on the poverty line and worse, we understand. So one can safely assume that some of that now committed money we heard about will go towards settling those claims and those debts that they owe to those staff. That takes care of around 138 million. There's another 100 million that's hopefully going to go towards the aircraft owners. That's for outstanding leases and penalties. The remainder was meant to go to the banks who'd been promised settlement of their loans before any other further discussion or involvement was discussed. And then after the creditors' meeting today, a public enterprises statement was issued and it suggested that the lending institutions are going to be asked to fund the restructuring process and honour the voluntary severance packages and retrenchment packages for those 3,000 odd staff. So at the moment, it looks like that's where we are right now, Raman.
Indeed, but this, I mean, the easy part is saying, yeah, we're going to give you, here's a check, $646 million provided courtesy of South African taxpayers. But when will that money be available? And more importantly, where would it come from?
Well, look, that's what the business practitioner euphemistically called or referred to in that meeting this morning as the modalities. That's he was quoting from a different letter then, obviously. That was during that creditors meeting on Friday. The unions, of course, as you know, boycotted that meeting because of the lack of money from government or the committed money from government. On the timelines for delivery of the cash, we understand from a statement from the DPE that government will reprioritize, they use the word, the money, and an announcement will be made when the adjustments appropriation bill is introduced in Parliament soon. Who knows what that means? It could mean anything. More interestingly, though, it's unclear where that money is going to be coming from, which means that there are going to be several government ministers who are going to be wondering if their budget is up for a snip in the short term. Raman?
Indeed, the Public Enterprises Ministry also said something interesting. They say they have gotten 20 unsolicited expressions of interest from a range of private sector funders, including private equity funds as well. Do we know who these funds are? And more importantly, what value are they seeing in trying to invest in a revamped, smaller version of SAA, given all the governance issues we've seen in the last decade?
Well, look, I attended a briefing earlier this week, and the Southern African regional manager for Ethiopian Airlines, one Abel Alemu, confirmed that they were in fact in discussion with SAA at various levels and were actually having different types of discussions, and that was before the lockdowns happened in South Africa, to see, as he put it, how they can work together, to see how they can help South African Airways. And this from an airline that is one of the few in the world that has actually continued flying throughout the lockdowns across the world. And also, more importantly, hasn't approached its government for a single cent in bailout money, as far as we understand. So they appear to see value in the SAA offering. The staff, of course, are well trained and loyal, so that may be value there. They do have several airport slots that they've held onto since they went into business rescue in the UK and the US, which also have some value. But you know what? As they say, value is in the eye of the beholder. All words to that effect, Raman.
Indeed, and of course the question is who's going to actually pay for all of this. One last question for you. With South Africa planning to reopen our airspace to international traffic, at least from October, what flights can SAA resume, and to what extent will that enable it to start rebuilding its revenue base and lessen its dependency on South African taxpayers?
Well, Raman, that's the tricky bit. The ministers of health and transport are the two ministers that have got to be talking to the airline industry. They haven't released any regulations in regard to this yet. Ramaphosa, of course, on Wednesday promised that they would use scientific methods to select those countries that would be allowed to fly into South Africa and out of South Africa to those countries that they're in. The proviso being that they be had to have a low transmission risk ratio or trend. And whilst 1 September is the opening date, there's no way that SAA is going to be in the air by then, not without any funding anyway. Added to which, they don't have much of a fleet left. We do understand that there were only 10 aircraft left in their hangars around the country in South Africa. The rest have been returned to their owners. And the leftovers aren't really the most efficient craft around by any stretch of the imagination, in fact. The cash injection for that new airline, of course, to get back into the skies will have to come from the private sector, those private equity funds you were talking about, for example, or interested consortia that are out there. In effect, that's got to come from that group of 20 parties that have showed interest. But nothing's been signed yet, so the money stays exactly where it is and nothing gets through to SAA to restart that airline. Raman?
Indeed, so 10 months on and SAA essentially remains grounded. Angela Coppola live in Johannesburg. Thank you. Now then, a run through some company headlines. On to Egypt. The authorities over there will set up its first factory for producing diesel-electric trains, both for its national rail lines and its metro lines as well. The facility will be set up in Port Said. The Planning Ministry made the announcement during a meeting that outlined the schedule of the project's implementation and the expected production volume. The factory will be run by the Egyptian Railway Services and Maintenance Company in partnership with privately owned firms, the Suez Canal Economic Zone and Egypt's Sovereign Wealth Fund as well. Over in South Africa, the retail group SPAR says support from Swiss customers saw its turnover in the country jump amidst the pandemic. In a trading update for the 48-week period ending on the 28th of August, the group said turnover in its Swiss subsidiary had gone up by 11.4% in Swiss franc currency terms year on year and over 30% in rand terms. Group sales in the period are up by over 12% to $6.8 billion. Turnover in South Africa was up by just under 5%. In East Africa, British American Tobacco's Kenya's subsidiary is pushing for a 3-year tax holiday on local production of nicotine pouches and similar products at its $25 million plant, which is close to completion. The company says it's open talks with the Finance Ministry and the Kenya Revenue Authority to have the non-combustible pouches be initially exempted from excise duty for between 2 to 3 years. BAT says that the oral pouches are an alternative to cigarettes and they really therefore should not be taxed at a comparable level. And finally, Thomas Cook's new owner, Fosun, has ambitious expansion plans for the brand once the global economy does recover. The Chinese travel firm also owns Club Med. It expects activity in the battered industry to pick up strongly once a viable COVID-19 vaccine does come to market. Fosun relaunched Thomas Cook in China in July. That was followed by a phase 1 launch in the UK this week, effectively about a year after it went bust, leaving thousands of clients stranded overseas. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up. Authorities in Zimbabwe in talks with international lenders to back a new securities exchange. And Tunisia is stepping up efforts to tap into the lucrative tourism market in China and Southeast Asia.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference. Welcome back. Authorities in Zimbabwe are in discussions with several international investment banks to support a new stock market that will trade exclusively using foreign currency. Now, the lenders involved are based in a range of places, Africa, Asia and Europe. The Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, as a new bourse will be known, will initially target mining companies operating in Zimbabwe and other companies that also have foreign listings. The exchange comes at a time when many foreign investors are struggling to get capital out of the country's main bourse. In June, Zimbabwe badly rattled domestic and foreign investors when authorities abruptly suspended trading on the Zimbabwean stock market for over a month. At the time, they accused some investors of using the bourse to manipulate the local currency. In the meantime, 3 East African countries are working on a World Bank-funded project which aims to connect regional stock markets. Under this plan, the bourses in Uganda, Rwanda and Tanzania will act as a single market with a view to reducing the cost and the time taken in trading in shares of companies listed in all 3 states. The 3 aim to start trading as a single market before the end of the year once they've interconnected their respective trading systems. Ideally, investors in the 3 countries should be able to trade in any listed asset in any of the countries without having to go through different stockbrokers in each one. Tunisia clinched the Best Organization Award at the International Tourism Industry Expo in Guangzhou. Now, the North African nation is looking to make much deeper inroads into the lucrative Southeast Asian travel and tourism market. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Alan Chouachi.
Tunisia's gross tourism industry is betting on the recent promotional success in China, where it won a prestigious award for a quick rebound following the downturn caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Tunisia's embassy in Beijing, the award was granted to the Tunisian pavilion in recognition of its distinction in terms of design and positive interaction with the visitors of the expo in China.
This is indeed very good news amid the stagnation of the tourism sector in the world. The best tourism exhibitions are still taking place in China. Boosting cooperation between Tunisian and Chinese professionals is a top priority.
The managing director of the National Office of the Tunisian Tourism added that the region of Guangzhou, south of China, is one of the most vibrant cities in the world. Therefore, winning an award in Guangzhou opens the door to new opportunities for tourism stakeholders in Tunisia and China.
Guangzhou is an exceptional destination. The National Office of the Tunisian Tourism has increased its promotion campaigns in the region to attract Chinese travelers who are very open to discovering North Africa with its beautiful nature, historic sites, and museums and culture.
Munir bin Milad is an international tourism expert. He is familiar with China's tourism industry.
Unlike in the rest of the world, exhibitions, fairs and international events are still taking place in China. Production is back and the economy will return to normal soon. These positive factors will encourage tourists from China to travel after the pandemic. Tunisia is ready to welcome them.
This 9th edition of the China International Tourism Industry Expo saw strong participation of professionals, tour operators and visitors who voiced willingness to ensure the resumption of leisure and tourism activities in the next few months. According to the National Office of the Tunisian Tourism, an intensive promotion campaign for the Tunisian destination was launched by the Tunisian Embassy in China through adverts on the screens of Beijing International Airport. The campaign aims to attract more Chinese travelers to the North African destination. Adan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
On to logistics now. Ethiopia's transport minister has commended the successful construction and operation of the standard gauge rail line between Ethiopia and Djibouti. With the details on this particular project, here's CGTN's Asta Tal.
The 756-kilometer electrified railway is the first transboundary railway on the African continent. It connects Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, to the Red Sea port in Djibouti. Contracted to 2 Chinese companies, the Ethiopia-Djibouti electrified railway has been playing an increasingly important role in facilitating the transportation of people and goods between the 2 countries.
Together, we accomplished a very significant task of construction of about 756 kilometers of railway line with major relevant infrastructure, rolling stocks and facilities, and the system was made open to operation since January 2018.
The Ethiopia-Djibouti electrified railway has already cut the transport time for goods from 7 days to less than 20 hours. It has also reduced the cost by at least 1/3 since commencing operations nearly 2 years ago. Presently, it provides different kinds of freight services, including the transport of perishable goods, vehicles, cereals, and fertilizers.
There are 13 countries in the world with a population size larger than 100 million. And you might have noticed that Ethiopia is the only one with no coastline and seaport. This is the major bottleneck for the development of Ethiopia. And 95% of the trade of Ethiopia goes through Djibouti.
Djibouti is important to landlocked Ethiopia, which currently imports and exports nearly 90% of its goods through its ports. For Ethiopia, the dream is that one day this railway will extend from Djibouti's coast all the way across Africa to the Atlantic Ocean. Astatal, CGTN.
On to Uganda now. The United Nations and the government over there say the country has increased its forest cover from 9 to 12%. They say this is the result of collaborative efforts between stakeholders in the public and the non-governmental sectors as well. As more and more countries prepare for major climate summit set to take place in New York next week, CGTN's Wanja Mungai tells us more about Uganda's success story in boosting its forest cover.
Mpanga Forest Reserve in central Uganda has lush vegetation and a dense forest cover. The tropical forest is a symbol of pride for conservationists.
We know that we have one of the best mahoganies in the world, in the forests that we have around here. There has been a recent wave on Aphuselia africana, which was being extracted from the northern and the northern part of the country, and then the Tectona grandis.
However, most of its surface area had been lost to farmers in the neighboring communities seeking farmland and firewood. 52-year-old Muhammad Kategera is a father of 12, and this part of the forest is his lifeline.
If only the prices of electricity would be reduced, we could afford to cook with electricity. What makes us destroy this forest is because we cannot afford to cook with electricity. I have electricity at my home, but we do not use it much because it is expensive. Unless electricity is made affordable for us, forests will remain our source of energy for cooking. We do not have an alternative.
Human activities like these led to a depletion of the forest cover, not just here in Mpingi, but in other parts of the country. The government reported a drop in the forest cover nationwide from 24% to 9% between 1990 and year 2015. But an initiative by the National Forestry Authority is now ensuring a recovery through reforestation and working alongside communities.
We've gone an extra mile to engage communities whom we call stakeholders that are living adjacent to these forest reserves and organize them into what we call collaborative forest management groups and are participating in the management of these forests. They are deriving benefits in a much more sustainable way and in an organized way.
The efforts are part of the United Nations Climate Action Goal. Trees, according to the United Nations Environmental Programme, act as carbon sinks, By absorbing carbons in the atmosphere, they eventually reduce global warming that causes climate change. Effects of climate change in this part of Africa can be seen through extreme weather and unpredictable rainfall, which affect agriculture.
We are still a rain-fed agricultural economy. So if you don't have health forests that can help you form the needed rain to support agriculture, then you will have to invest heavily into the irrigation, which still would as well suffer. The other factor is that focusing on rehabilitating these forests would still support the energy sector. These forests are catchments for all these rivers and lakes, and that's where we are generating power from these rivers. So it is a very critical resource that must be focused on critically and therefore supported so that other dependent sectors can also flourish.
The government of Uganda aims at going back to its once glorious past. It targets to double the forest cover to 24% by year 2014. And as the Climate Week begins on Monday in New York, the East African nation takes pride in embracing climate action by planting one tree at a time. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
South Africa's cinema exhibitors, film distributors and international studio representatives have put on a united, non-competitive front as the industry struggles to emerge from the pandemic's economic damage. Cinemas were allowed to reopen across South Africa at the start of July after a 5-month-long shutdown. Here's CGTN's Angela Coppola examining the odds of the sector's revival.
The COVID-19 lockdown drove cinema goers to watch movies online, and it's been tough on the industry.
There was a nice lineup of big Hollywood movies that were coming out, and even European movies. So we had some events booked, but after people started talking about COVID possibly being in South Africa, they started getting cancelled, and then the lockdown happened.
The cinema sector was unlikely to make it through without some serious help.
Some of our partners really came to the party, so property owners and landlords were very helpful and conciliatory in terms of our lease obligations. We made use of the TERS relief scheme in managing our staff, and we put many people on furlough. So, I think it's fair to say that there's a pretty significant impact. Obviously, you don't get away with running a business with zero costs during that entire period. So we've had to manage our cash.
Cinemas have initiated stringent protocols to make the environment safe for their customers. Limited human interaction is a key imperative, from booking online to limited pre-ordered snack menus, social distancing and wearing of masks.
People go to our environments, they seat themselves, and then they sit quietly facing all in the same direction. So droplet play is actually significantly limited versus what you would find in potentially other gathering spaces.
The shift to level 1 lockdown will have some impact on cinemas. Owners can now allow 50% of their seats to be filled, with the normal protocols in place.
But we're still trying to understand how we operate on that level. I think it will help because I believe in the customer's mind they'll say, okay, it's maybe safer to go out now and come to the cinema. And we can also increase, I believe, our occupancy a bit in our cinema so we can get more people in.
Is effectively an increase from about a 30% of occupancy up to 50% occupancy. And that makes a difference in our key shows. So already in these first few weeks at the sites that we had open, we were seeing sellout shows.
The cinema industry in South Africa is basically on its knees, and it's going to depend on the citizens about whether it picks up again or not. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
At 18:33 GMT, it's time for another break. Here's what's coming up shortly. A ban on Chinese-owned apps, TikTok and WeChat, set to go into effect on the 20th of September. And airlines in the United States are begging the White House for help as thousands of layoffs loom large. Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back. The US Commerce Department has announced that it will bar Americans from downloading the messaging app WeChat and the video sharing app TikTok, both of which are owned by Chinese companies, from the 20th of September. Now, time is ticking for TikTok's parent firm ByteDance, which is racing to clinch an agreement with Oracle, which may shield its operations in the US. ByteDance has been talking with Oracle and a few other companies to create a new outfit, TikTok Global, which would, at least on paper, address Trump administration concerns about the security of its users' data. Now, this proposed solution still needs the US president's approval if it is to stave off a total ban on American operations. Commerce officials say they will not bar additional technical transactions for TikTok until the 12th of November, which effectively gives the company a bit more time to see if ByteDance can close a deal with Oracle that the White House can get behind. The heads of US airlines are begging the White House for tens of billions of dollars to stave off massive layoffs in a fortnight. With lawmakers deadlocked over a new COVID-19 relief package, airlines want President Donald Trump to step in before they're compelled to make some rather dramatic job cuts. CGTN's Owen Fairclough now reports.
There's no more bailout money for tens of millions of unemployed Americans, but that hasn't stopped airlines from tapping up the White House.
We airline CEOs are here on behalf of the people that work for us who are doing great jobs out there, taking care of keeping our country moving when our country's largely paralyzed with fear. They're out there putting their uniforms on, going to work every day and making sure we're moving. And without action, they're going to be furloughed on October 1st, and it's not fair.
That's the expiration date for $25 billion in federal payroll support, part of a multi-trillion-dollar relief package passed in the spring when COVID-19 floored the US economy. But Democrat and Republican lawmakers have failed to agree on the size of a second bailout. And that's left airlines lobbying both President Trump and the Speaker of the Democrat-led House of Representatives to support a standalone funding bill.
The White House is very interested in getting something done, so we reached out to the Speaker, just encouraged the two sides to work together so that we can save jobs and really, in a broader sense, save this economy.
US airlines have already drawn up plans to lay off tens of thousands of workers, with passenger traffic still sharply down due to the pandemic. President Trump has already used executive orders to extend unemployment benefits and has suggested using the same powers for airlines if Congress remains deadlocked. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Now, many German restaurants and hotels are taking their insurance companies to court, demanding that they pay for damages incurred due to government-ordered restrictions designed to limit the spread of COVID-19. CGTN's Natalie Carney has the details from Munich.
Christian Rottenhamel owns one of the biggest beer gardens in the city. He is suing his insurance company for $1.6 million in compensation.
We have taken out business closure insurance that amounts to a very large sum, but received an offer from the insurance company that we rejected, as it was only 15% of the actual amount. And that is too little for us, and that is why we are suing in court.
A total of 72 complaints against insurance companies have been received by the Regional Court of Munich, and that number continues to rise. Following the 2-month state-regulated lockdown earlier this year, the Bavarian government immediately offered financial incentives to help recoup losses, which it says makes up 70% of the damages incurred by businesses. The remaining 30%, the state argues, is in the hands of the insurance companies.
Normally, we have 700 events per year. All of them were certainly canceled.
Fellow beer garden owner Karl-Heinz Zacher is also taking a large international insurer to court. He says they owe him $500,000 after saying his lockdown-related claim was invalid.
The insurance company very quickly rejected our claim, stating that this general ruling, or legislative decree, that has been issued by the Free State of Bavaria is not valid, because our company is not so-called intrinsically affected, because we did not have a COVID case ourselves.
The terminology of the insurance contract is where much of the problems lie. Not all insurance policy conditions coincide with the health and safety rules introduced by the Bavarian authorities in the wake of COVID-19. At the same time, not all establishments shut down completely. A local kindergarten, which was state-ordered to remain open for children of frontline workers, lost their case for compensation.
Only about 10% of the whole facility was open during that time, but the court was of the opinion that the insurance didn't have to pay for the closing of the facility. We will appeal the decision because we do not think that it's just.
Zacher has had his day in court and hopes to receive a decision later this month, but says he will continue to fight it to the highest court if he has to.
I'm still sure that this issue will go further. I believe it will not be done with the first hearing. There will be appeals. I think that if politicians do not intervene, lawsuits will last for many years to come.
This battle to claim compensation is growing around the world. Earlier this week, British judges ruled that insurers were wrong to reject claims, a move that is estimated to affect 370,000 businesses and billions in insurance claims.
While many verdicts are still pending, insurance companies continue to offer business closure insurance. However, these renewed contracts now include pandemic exclusion clauses in case state officials are again put in a position whereby most companies must be shut down due to a pandemic. Natalie Carney for CGTN in Munich.
Now, one of China's largest exhibitions this year, the 22nd China International Industry Fair, is underway in Shanghai. Some small and medium-sized foreign companies couldn't attend the 2020 event, obviously, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But multinationals with investments in the world's second largest economy were pretty happy to have the opportunity to showcase the latest products and innovations. CGTN's Ying Junyi has the details on what's hot tonight.
Swiss industrial giant ABB Group is one of the foreign exhibitors launching new products at the CIIF this year. This new one focuses more on the healthcare sector rather than industry, using artificial intelligence and machine learning technology for lab and pharmacy automation. It's already in use in some hospitals.
We see a big demand coming also from the healthcare sector. We focus on the problems of our customers. It used to be always quality and productivity, but what is new when coming also through the current situations is flexibility and simplicity.
ABB is not the only foreign exhibitor finding new opportunities in healthcare. Filtration specialist manufacturer Sofima is another company moving into the field by producing personal protection masks.
So we use our technology, our competences, and our innovation to produce some products which is new for us, but is using our core media inside.
In addition to introducing new products, some foreign companies are also here to announce more investments and deals with local firms. The continuing recovery of China's economy is giving them plenty of confidence in the China market.
We forecast also some further investment, enlargement of some companies already in China, especially in the sector of mechanical related to infrastructure and renewable energy.
The industry fair will last 5 days and end this Saturday. It is also producing live stream programs for those who have not been able to attend in person. Ying Junyi, ICS for CGTN Shanghai.
Right, then a quick run through commodities for you. So the Libyan general, as I mentioned a little earlier, who's blockaded oil exports for a while now, Khalifa Haftar, he says now he's going to lift that blockade. So potentially that will add a fair bit of supply to a rather weak oil market beyond the 1.1 million barrels a day that Libya was supplying with that blockade in place. How much supply can be added to the market and when are both key unknown variables at this point. Nonetheless, Brent crude is about 9/10 lower at 12:01 GMT, 42.93 a barrel at that point in time. Here's what's coming up next. Zimbabwe's government is reopening its tourism sector amid some rather strict protocols. The details coming up next.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent, to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. The tourism industry in Zimbabwe is now focusing on the long game before seeing any serious recovery. This comes after the government fully reopened the sector, which has been practically destroyed by the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. CGTN's Farai Mokutuya now takes a look at how businesses in the sector are hoping to lure tourists like you from all over the world back into Zimbabwe.
There's strict adherence to safety protocols as hotels welcome guests back. Room occupancy is still low, but conference business is picking up.
Here at Crystal Lodge, we've got Sango Conference Center. As we speak, the take-up is on 65%, which is encouraging, and we're looking forward to it getting to 100% in the next coming weeks.
The Cresta Group runs 5 hotels, including one in Victoria Falls, where most players are in the doldrums.
Some have opened up in recent weeks as domestic tourism has returned, but many have remained shut, particularly those that require higher rates for their services. You know, they're really reliant on the international market, and so really until international travelers return here, Victoria Falls will remain really quiet.
International airlines will be allowed to return in October, but no quick rebound is expected. It's going to be a long and complex road back, especially as the global industry still tries to work out things like visas, travel insurance, testing and quarantine protocols.
People will still think twice about traveling, be it short haul or long haul, as is the case for international travelers visiting Victoria Falls. We expect to see the more adventurous travelers, maybe single travelers and couples. You know, it's more tricky for multi-generational travelers to come and for big groups to travel.
Until then, there's a deliberate strategy to try to induce domestic tourism.
In order for us to allow this industry to reopen and to grow again, we need to make sure that the locals can access the facilities. And we have come up with a domestic-based pricing to allow the locals to be able to patronize our properties.
That will defer the industry's revenue targets.
So we are willing to wait for another 12 to 24 months in this recovery period. But by that time, our tourism economy on its own should be within the range of $2.5 to $3 billion, because we are targeting to get to $5 billion within a frame of maybe 2025, thereabout. That's our target.
Tourism, which had been earmarked as one of the key economic recovery drivers, is expected to contract by a staggering 7.4% on the back of the COVID-19 crisis. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Now, London's Savile Row has been the last word in bespoke suiting for centuries, but at this point in time, it's facing quite the existential crisis. A large proportion of revenue over there, in fact more than 60% in the case of some companies, comes from foreign clients. Many tailors also do what they call trunk shows. They travel to places like the United States, the Far East, the Middle East for sales and fittings. But this has been made impossible by the restrictions on travel due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So how are they adapting? CGTN's Nawai Jabahgil explores that.
The world-famous Savile Row. Since the 18th century, this London street has been known for its bespoke tailoring. But because of COVID-19, things are a lot quieter this year.
It has been pretty dire, obviously from the first couple of months of total lockdown, especially in the bespoke world. We need to see people up close, so that kind of didn't happen. Slowly getting back into it again.
It's not just fewer people browsing through textiles here. The pandemic's also causing more of us to work from home, and the cancellation of mass events and gatherings is weighing on business.
For centuries, the suit has been the go-to outfit for millions of office workers worldwide. But UK researchers have found that 9 in 10 of us who've worked from home recently would like to continue doing so in some form in the future. That's how some in the tailoring industry worried about just how often people would need to get measured.
Like Craig, many on Savile Row rely on international customers, mostly from the US, China and East Asia. Unlike many industries that have moved online since the coronavirus, this is one trade that depends on the personal touch.
Travelling around the world is a big thing in the bespoke world. You know, we can't rely on footfall in London. We are waiting for it to open up again so we can fly again and get to see clients who are dying to see us as well. That would be, you know, we need that to happen as soon as possible. Yeah.
At an average of more than $5,000 a suit in this store, this is certainly a niche market. Despite the challenges, though, many here are optimistic things will pick up.
Even if you're working from home now and if you're on Zoom calls or video calls, you're going to be seen, so you're going to need to dress up. People have done that. You've seen them wearing the shirts and jackets. It just shows they still want to represent themselves and represent their companies and look smart.
So many of our work habits have been transformed by COVID, including what we wear. There may be fewer reasons to don a suit these days, but its professional appeal looks likely to endure. Nawai Jabahgil, CGTN, London.
Keeping up with that fashion theme, the pandemic has been anything but ideal for high fashion, with runway shows cancelled, retailers going out of business, and sweatpants and athleisure becoming the uniform of the season. Well, except here, apparently. Despite all of that, the New York Fashion Week is back, just with a lot less glitz than usual. Here's CGTN's Karina Huber with that story.
Under normal circumstances, New York Fashion Week is one of the city's buzziest times of the year. Not this year. There are no crowds lining up to see the shows, no frenetic backstage activity, and only a handful of runway shows. The duration of the biannual event has also been cut from 7 to 5 days. New York City was once at the epicenter of the global pandemic. It wasn't a given that New York Fashion Week would return.
IMG worked very closely with the governor of New York's office to understand what protocols need to be in place for health and safety to be able to put on the event in a safe way.
Spring Studios, which is traditionally the headquarters of many of the runway shows here at New York Fashion Week, is still being used, albeit in different ways. There's a very limited number of socially distanced outdoor runway shows happening on the rooftop, whereas the inside has been transformed into studios so designers can make content.
Designers are making films or social media content that showcases their new collections that is later posted on the New York Fashion Week website as if it's live. The Council of Fashion Designers of America has also created its own digital platform, runway360.com, to showcase runway shows. It's been described as a one-stop shop for the fashion industry. There are designer profiles, live streams, and other content. Buyers can also place orders through the site, and designers can get data about what's being watched and liked. For models, it's an interesting time.
I've done a few shows so far, and it's honestly been very strange. So everything obviously is very spaced out, and so backstage there can be like at least 100 people in one room for the hair and makeup, and now it's like dwindling. Like there'll be like less than a dozen.
Some hope this forced pause will allow for some reflection in the industry that has become increasingly fast-paced.
In the luxury fashion industry, it is a moment to reassess what are the values that really matter to you as a brand.
Experts believe it's also a moment that has fast-tracked the transition to digital.
I think that we'll see the event portion and guests come back to the event, but the digital enhancements maintained and continue to evolve.
Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
All right, then, as we wrap up the program in the currency section, a quick look at some high-frequency data coming out of Kenya. Tax revenues were down 1% month-on-month in August to about 93.5 billion shillings. That's roughly $865 million. But it's fallen by over 17% compared to August last year. The research team at Genghis Capital is saying that this, among other high-frequency data they're looking at, suggests that the pandemic's effect on the economy might be more dire than expected. Wages and salaries soaked up at least 53% of recurrent expenditure. Expect the public debt ordinary revenue ratio to get close to 60% in the 2020-2021 fiscal year. That's a run through your currencies, and that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.